so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to speak to everybody. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and tell you about myself and our organization, and then I'll move into discussing how mentorship can help young girls and women in the STEM fields. Again, my name is Kate Brodock. I'm president of an organization called Girls in Tech. Despite the name, we're actually a nonprofit for women in technology and entrepreneurship. We have 50 chapters around the world. And while our primary focus is on women in technology, we do have a very robust focus on mentorship, both of young women in the university age group and also K through 12 or the international equivalent. We call them our next generation coming up, and we do think that they're very important to the future of women in STEM fields. As part of that, and of course, because not only do we just do it by practice, but it's also a large part of our mission. We have had a lot of experience with mentorship and think that, of course, it's very important to everybody's future. So I wanted to discuss, I'm under the impression that most people are kind of in the high school, middle school education space. I have put a lot of concepts in here that can be used more broadly, and then some also that are a little bit more focused. So moving forward, I will get right into it. Quick agenda. What I want to talk about is I first want to just go over high level what we're talking about in the classroom setting and what that setting means for both young adults and for specifically for girls in STEM classes, et cetera, just to put some context around what we're talking about. The second thing is I'm going to go over quickly the importance of mentorship, fairly obvious topic, but still very important to highlight some of the pieces that go into that. I want to take a couple minutes and talk about the idea of mentorship versus sponsorship. Hopefully not everyone here has heard of the concept of sponsorship, but I think it is definitely one that's important to think about if you're tackling mentorship in general. I then am going to go over quickly the mentors and then various examples and suggestions and thoughts about how to think about mentorship within your environments. So putting the classroom in context. The reason I wanted to focus here on the classroom is that I think a lot of, this is probably obvious to you all as educators, but a lot of people tend to think of mentorship as almost extraneous to the classroom. But really, mentorship, it's really important to be thinking about it as a support structure for what's happening in the classroom. And I don't just mean course content, curriculum, and that sort of thing, but also, again, some of the realities that we're seeing. So in this particular case, we'll talk about what girls may experience in classroom settings that's unique to them, and thinking about mentorship as also being a support system for those types of realities that we have. Just having a little trouble clicking here. Oh, sorry, caught up to me. Okay, girls STEM in the classroom. So there are stats abound on women in STEM, girls in STEM, education, et cetera. So I'm not going to throw too many at you, but I do want to just highlight a couple of things to think about. You know, first and foremost, college women do actually earn 50% of the degrees in science and engineering, but many of the disciplines, most especially computer science, are very underrepresented. In high school, males are 6 times more likely to take engineering courses. 13% of engineering professionals and only 25% of computer and math science professionals are the positions are held by females. And then again, when we jump into leadership positions in a lot of companies, that percentage gets a lot lower as well. Some people attribute to this, and some research supports the fact that some of this, at least, is due to inadequate support in the middle school and high school system for math and science. A lot of these can be conscious and unconscious situations, but it is important to look at that certainly as an opportunity to help the space. I could go on and on. 57% of all girls say when they're looking at them and their counterparts, 50% of all girls say that other girls don't generally consider careers in STEM. So you can see how aspects of groupthink are in there. Between 2000 and 2011, there was a 79% decline in the number of first-year undergraduate women interested in computer science. That's a huge, huge percentage, 79%. And that's in a time period where you would think that number should actually decrease. 12% of U.S. engineers are women. Only 2% are underrepresented minority women. So that's a whole other separate issue. And then just in general, when we think about the pay gap, women earn 80 cents to the men's dollar, and that number is much larger when you get into the STEM fields. If we step away from the stats and we think about some of the more qualitative aspects of the classroom, and a lot of this is supported by research, in some cases very extensive research. But girls actually receive less attention in general in the classroom. Now, most of this can be attributed, at least in the U.S., most of this does end up being unconscious bias. Some of it is, though, very conscious. And this is not just in middle school and high school, but definitely when you get into college, I've heard just really discouraging anecdotes about computer science departments and the real blatant lack of support that female students receive from their mostly male, very male-centric departments. In general, achievements of women are minimized or ignored in textbooks. And one definitely could be worrisome stat is that sexual harassment by boys is actually on the rise towards their female peers. Now, when we say sexual harassment, we don't actually mean sexual in nature, but anything from, oh, girls can't do that, or that's not a job for girls. That type of thing is what we're talking about here. That's actually been on the rise in the classroom. So as you can see, I just want to paint a little picture of inside the classroom. Here's what's actually happening. Here's the environment for girls. And an obvious extension of that is first obvious extension, which I won't get into here, is how can we decrease some of what's happening in the classroom. But for the purposes of today, I wanted to suggest that mentorship can be a really positive influence on a lot of what looks to be a somewhat discouraging picture. I want to talk about quickly, before we jump into mentors, about connecting to mentors, especially at a younger age group. There's a school of thought when you talk about mentorship in general, especially in the professional setting, that the idea of organic mentorship is really the way to go. No one should ever be forced into a mentor or mentee position. It's something that should be happening naturally when people click, and definitely not something that can be pushed. I would argue that that may be true when you actually get into the professional setting, when social skills and relationship building skills and an eye towards career development are much more well tuned. But we have to take a step back and think about the behavior of young adults that we have. And this is young adults, this is not necessarily girls, but at this age group, what tends to happen is that young adults are not necessarily 100% future-oriented when they're thinking about career. A lot of times they're told to try things out or suggested to be going towards one career or another. Relationship building skills are somewhat narrow in scope. They don't necessarily think about, geez, in 5 years, my relationship with this person might be really beneficial. I should keep up a relationship. And putting some structural support around a lot of these systems can actually be very helpful with a younger age group. So really having an intentful mentorship program in this case, I would definitely argue is almost necessary in order to really get the full effect of a mentorship program. Next, I want to talk about the importance of mentorship. Sorry, we're moving, there we go. A lot of this is going to seem obvious, but I think it's still really important to go through step by step. So I first want to talk about young adults in general. Mentors very clearly can offer valuable, I put here career and or future insight, because again, careers in a young adult's age group may be less of an obvious idea or concept when they're still looking on the horizon on college, and they're still exploring what they even like to do in general in terms of coursework, that sort of thing. So careers may not be front of mind, but future certainly is for a lot of people. Otherwise, parents are certainly not doing their jobs if not. So very valuable career from a practical standpoint, career and future insight. Mentorship also offers a very powerful system for role model, the role model process. When you are put in contact with successful, driven, very forward-thinking mentors and whatever sort of format that mentorship comes into, that oftentimes has a very strong effect just on aspirational ideas of what could come for young adults. And this is, I point this out because this is less so when you get into a mentor-mentee system in a professional setting. The idea of role model comes down a little bit as attainable. It certainly does not go away, but there's a little bit more of a peer feeling when you get into the professional setting, whereas for young adults, it's really an important role model situation that they can be placed into. Another really fantastic thing that mentorship does for young adults is that it really helps them when you have an effective mentor. It really helps to have them realize their strengths and encourages them to really get to their full potential. Whatever mentor situation that may be in, that's usually a very key part of mentorship, is really pushing and allowing that process of realization to come around. It definitely helps young adults think about goals, think about the school, think about their future. When you're able to put actual real-life situations in place and you can hear feedback from somebody who has learned a lot and has actually been doing these things, that puts a very, again, very practical framework around what could be very, very vague situation. My future, what is that like? Oftentimes, mentorship has been attributed to having a better attitude about school and about their future. Definitely, in some cases, this can lead to a very enhanced level of self-esteem or self-confidence. And then, fairly obviously, it really does help with stronger relationship building and interpersonal skills. So that's just in general why mentorship for young adults is very beneficial. Very specifically for young women, mentorship can be have a very positive influence in the STEM field specifically. As I alluded to, classroom settings and co-ed learning environments oftentimes are not the most conducive to female learning. Oftentimes you'll hear of girls in the classroom setting, and even little things like they tend to sit on the outside of class. They tend to be one of the second, third, or sometimes last people to raise their hands. Little things like that. The classroom setting isn't always conducive for allowing female learners to really excel. Additionally, mentorship for a young woman creates strong bonds with successful professional women, and this really does play to a specific female trait of relationship building. Research has shown that this is a stronger suit, perhaps, of females, is this relationship building, and mentorship really plays to that. Mentorship also allows girls direct insight into what a possible career educational path could be in STEM, gives them a firsthand account, again, allows them to see a very specific and direct example of a mentor in the space that they're considering, in this case, STEM. And a lot of times that can help with breaking down some common stereotypes. A lot of surveys of young women who are perhaps in middle school and high school, and they're asked about careers in IT or careers in a computer. A lot of what needs to be combated are some stereotypes that even these girls have. It's unclear where they've necessarily gotten them, but anything from, oh, that's very geeky, or, oh, that's not very ladylike, or, you know, the level of, quote, pretty girls in these STEM fields. These are a lot of stereotypes that unfortunately girls actually do hold. So allowing them access to mentors who can break down some of those stereotypes. Oh, I have a mentor and she's a computer scientist, and she doesn't seem very geeky. That type of thing, that really allows them to get over some of that, those factors, which can also be supplemented by peer conversations, etc. It helps break down some of those stereotypes that girls may have. And again, it allows for them to have advice, direction, counseling at a really crucial point in girls' advancement in STEM. Again, this is an age group where the drop-off rate from high school to college for women interested in these fields is very large. It's one of the largest drop-off rates that you'll actually see in this. Another obvious one is right after college. So of the women who, quote, make it through the STEM field in college, there's another precipitous drop-off, but high school to college is actually a very large one as well. And then also, you know, hypothetically speaking, if your system or the classroom setting is perhaps sometimes could have also a more traditional viewpoint. Again, whether that's biased or unbiased, This allows young women a connection point that's very supportive in this space. I want to talk about the idea of mentorship versus sponsorship, what to think about when we talk about these things, because sponsorship is oftentimes talked about in conjunction with mentorship. So I want to explain this idea. Okay, great. So what's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship? Mentorship it's often skills oriented, so you are usually within a certain discipline, you're matched up, you focus a lot on what some of the attributes of that, quote, profession or career may have. There's a level of advising and guiding that goes on, to be sure. There is a level of experience sharing, and there's certainly an aspect of listening to mentees, talking them through a lot of the thought process, perhaps putting structure around that thought process. That is a very effective model, and we'll talk about in a second which one's, quote, better or not. Sponsorship is the idea of pushing mentorship a little bit more. It usually includes all the components of mentorship, but what it has in addition to that is an active role on the part of the, quote, mentor or sponsor to actually be pulling the mentee along, creating opportunities and always looking for opportunities in the space, opening doors, creating introductions, networking, that type of thing. I want to bring this to the table because in the professional world, it's often said that women are fantastic at mentorship and men are fantastic at sponsorship, and that sometimes in a professional setting, sponsorship is what's really needed to get people to the leadership position. Now, again, this is a school of thought we're talking about, but thinking about the components of sponsorship when we're talking about mentorship could be valuable even just from a high-level theoretical standpoint. So is one better than the other? Well, it does kind of depend. And especially at a younger age group, mentorship is incredibly valuable to put structure around situations, to put a career and a course path into context, to have an advisor to talk through. A lot of times young adults there aren't a ton of opportunities to actually advance, unless it's maybe a college reference or something, or perhaps an internship, which is certainly great. Sponsorship may not be entirely applicable at this age group, and mentorship is certainly not insufficient. But I did want to point that out because when we do have a gender breakdown, sponsorship and the qualities that go along with sponsorship are sometimes found to be lacking when we're talking about females versus males. The mentors. So in this field, what makes good mentors? Okay, mentor qualities. In general, some really well-documented attributes of a good mentor are obviously professional experience. They have to have the ability and willingness to advise, and part of that is also a commitment level. I'll mention it now, but it comes into play when we talk about some specific examples. A lot of structured programs do require a certain level, normally in the context of a time frame, certain level of commitment from their mentors, which is important. Remember that these are volunteer positions, And as with any volunteer position across the globe, what you do get is people very interested to start, but once life kind of gets going and gets back in the way, you know, volunteer positions are some of the first to kind of go to the wayside. So making sure that mentors really do have that commitment to advising. Passion is always good. I personally think that it's necessary, but you could also get somebody who is very good at their job and is very interested in a mentor in a mentor relationship, may not be the utmost passionate person, may not go out and do the 5 extracurricular activities around their area of expertise, but within that context of a mentor-mentee relationship, still has the passion for that relationship that will take it and move it forward effectively. Mentor, in my opinion, a good quality of a mentor is also open to learning themselves and reverse mentorship. This isn't 100% necessary, I don't think, but having a mentor who has the ability to not just view themselves as the teacher, but view themselves in an equal relationship is, I think, creates stronger mentor-mentee relationships. So something to keep in mind, again, probably not necessary. I like to see it in mentorship programs. And the idea of reverse mentorship is a specific concept about more experienced professionals actually taking on a less experienced, more junior level relationship as a mentee, to be learning from that younger, fresher, perhaps you know, a different viewpoint on the industry. That's a often used term. Again, that's a little bit more applicable to the actual professional setting, but the idea is still beneficial. They have to have belief in the mentee. It becomes very difficult if you have a mentor who really only goes through the motions and they don't truly believe in their mentor or in the mentorship process. That really doesn't work very well at all. I mentioned creating an equal relationship, and then specifically with this age group, being an excellent listener and being patient is very important. Listening is important in any relationship, but specifically you're going to have with this age group, you know, figuring things out. They're going to want to talk about experiences. They're going to want to talk about what they're thinking about types of things. And then also being patient too with this age group is very important as well. And then it's beneficial for them to have, quote, role model qualities. Again, not mandatory. And what I mean by that is, do they have maybe a compelling story about how they got to leadership, or have they really become an expert, a known expert in the field? Have they really, you know, had something highly visible that that allows them to draw back on experience? The reason I point this out is because there are some people who make excellent mentors who may frankly be in an industry and they may be very, quote, under the radar, and they still could be very excellent very excellent mentors in that field. They may not necessarily be well known within their community or that type of thing, but they're very experienced. They're experts in the field. They have a story moving up from perhaps, college to the professional life, that sort of thing. So I just throw that out there as something to think about. Both work. And where to identify members? First thing, obviously, parents. One thing I have noticed very often in the middle school and high school setting is that a lot of school systems forget about their alumni, especially alumni that have now come back and are in the local community. Alumni are a huge focus in higher ed. You're always talking about how can we connect, how can we use our alumni, et cetera, less so in pre-university settings. So something to think about. Local community is an obvious one, and also thinking sort of, quote, new school and thinking about any online opportunities. Again, that could be with an alum. It could be with just a broader network online, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Think about their, quote, proximity to the classroom. This doesn't actually mean physical, but how are they going to come in and interact with the students, or how are they able to? Can they actually come into the classroom? Are they only accessible during the weekends? Or the evenings or something like that. So thinking about where they can be placed in a system as a mentor and what structural support may need to happen around that. Obviously, their availability and commitment level is important. And in a lot of cases, in order to get mentors, you may actually need to educate some of the above mentioned groups. A lot of people who are very successful, who are wonderful role models, who would make great mentors, do not think about mentorship often. And that's not uncommon. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing or at all, but it may take actually approaching and having a small outreach campaign to have people recognize in themselves that they'd make an excellent mentor program. So as an example, this could be literally at a PTA meeting. It could be through an organized event at the school system. It could be through a dedicated e-newsletter, something like that, where you're actually having people self-realize and self-identify themselves as potential mentors, and why that's important. Lastly, I want to talk about the connection points that we have, and this is where I'll also bring up a couple of examples and a couple of different ways to think about mentorship in the school structure. Oops, sorry. The first one is in the classroom. Now, I put old school here in quotes because one of the tried and true methods of mentoring in the classroom with this age group is literally to have mentors come into the classroom, and you can do pairing off, you can do small groups, you can do round robin type of thing, and it's oftentimes very structured. There's an agenda. There can be at sometimes literally kind of a set of questions to run through, that type of thing. There's a Q&A, et cetera. One thing to really think about in the classroom is that group mentorship is oftentimes thought of as a one-to-one relationship, but especially at this age group, group mentoring can be very powerful. That is where you may have one or two mentors coming in and speaking to a group of girls. So, the way that there needs to be some structure around it, a curriculum, an agenda, et cetera, but that is actually a very powerful way to attain a lot of the mentorship capabilities that you have. and can also feed into the peer-to-peer connections, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that this age group definitely feeds off of. So don't forget that group mentoring in a lot of these settings can be very, very effective if structured correctly. And then also thinking new school again is the idea of virtual sessions. If you have the capabilities inside your classrooms, if you have a science class, or maybe you have an after-school program where you invite girls to come in and experience a series of virtual sessions where they are actually connecting to, you could think of them as speakers, but again, the idea is that they can interact back and forth with the speaker. They can ask questions. It's very future-oriented, career, discipline, industry-oriented. They're speaking very specifically about their experiences, and the girls are able to ask specific questions about their own situations, their own thoughts about the industry. So again, it's not a talk. It is not, I'm coming into, for instance, right here, we have a webinar going on. It's very interactive. And again, that does require some technical setup, but can be very powerful. I have had actually a couple of high schools in the United States who have invited me to be on in a series of virtual sessions that they have after school for girls in STEM. And so I literally will, kind of get on and speak to girls, and I'm one in a series of maybe 6. They've got a 6-week series lined up, and I'm week 3, for instance. And honestly, it really ends up being a very interactive back and forth Q&A discussion with a handful of girls who are interested in the field. So very cool idea where you can actually bring it right into the classroom. In the school, so sometimes you can't get right into the classroom, but your school can create sort of extracurricular programs. One is a very specific school-hosted mentorship program where where mentors are recruited at the school level. They're paired off or grouped off, etc. With the students. There are usually a series of, a couple of times a year, large group interaction sessions, whether it be just mingling and talking or whether it be something structured. And then there's usually a component of some sort of ongoing communication, whether it's a lunch or something like that between the mentor and the mentees as the program moves on. So that can take a wide variety of different formats. Another thing to think about is also how mentorship can be built into larger programs. There's a school, an international school in Manhattan, the Dwight School. They have a high school internship program where students are able to go into, they've recruited a whole load of local businesses. Students are able to go in a couple of times during the semester, if you will, and they're able to shadow and kind of look at what's happening in that business system. They're paired by industry interests. And built into that internship program is a further hands-on mentorship program. So a sub-portion of the students involved in the internship program will then also be paired with one specific person within these signing on organizations and have an actual mentorship relationship. So that was all developed by the school. And something that they have created and support as a school. There's also, again, the alumni connection, thinking about connecting alumni to the students in some way. Again, this could be digital. It could be a program over some sort of holiday break. I've seen that structure as well, and that type of thing. Student to local business professionals, that was kind of what I was talking about with the Dwight School, but again, connecting them directly to business professionals in the area. And then also this is another great candidate for group mentoring. A really important concept is that group mentoring. Hold on. In the community, this is where you have a lot of already existing programs that are really excellent. For instance, take a look at your nonprofits. Girls in Tech, wherever we have chapters, we have mentorship programs. And there are things like Girls Who Code. Girls Who Code is specifically training for girls for literally to code, but they also have a mentorship program. And Girls Inc. is specifically for mentorship. And there are also some great, sort of after-school programs that are put together by a lot of nonprofits or universities, et cetera. Again, take a look at your universities, whether it's a local university or, perhaps there's a university in state or something like that that provides mentorship programs as well. The iSchool at SU has an excellent mentorship program. The reality is that I will tell you a lot of these universities sometimes a lot of it is for recruiting purposes, but they're still really high quality programs. MIT has a summer mentorship program in many cities. And then I mention USC here because USC is the first pilot chapter of our Girls in Tech University, so GITU. Essentially what they do is they create a mini chapter within their university, but part of their role as well is to then be creating mentorship relationships with the local middle school and high school girls in those fields. So thinking about what within universities, what existing groups, and there are almost every major university that has a technical component to it, have some sort of women in engineering, women in STEM, women in tech, women in computer science. They all have those organizations existing, and reaching out to them could prove very beneficial. And then obviously reaching out, businesses will oftentimes do mentorship programs. A lot of businesses, they have this in their community corporate responsibility roles and social good agendas. So that's something you could also think about, or you can reach out to a specific business and create that. So thinking about some of what you have in the area to be working on is very important. A couple of others, online mentoring and learning. There are a couple of organizations. iCouldBe.org is an example of literally, they tend to focus on slightly underrepresented youth, more at-risk youth, but it's an example of a online matching of mentor and mentee. They do this in a secure online platform, and that's proved to be really successful. And again, they have an entire STEM division. Our global classroom, this is our online learning component. It is an actual course. We just launched our first web development, intro to web development for 13 to 18-year-old girls from around the world. It's really exciting, but within that, there is a component of mentorship. Mentors are placed inside the engagement platform where all of the students take their curriculum and move into, and they talk amongst themselves, and then they also have mentors in there to talk about anything from classwork to career questions to anything. Do not forget peer-to-peer. For female girls, peer-to-peer, absolutely, they feed off of this. So whenever you can use that, that's why I mentioned group mentoring is so powerful at this age group. When you get peers involved together, whether they have separate mentors and they're able to come back together to talk amongst themselves, or whether it's in a group mentoring session, they will feed off of each other. They will bring it onto social platforms. They will talk about their discussions that they had with their mentor and talks amongst themselves and that sort of thing. So that peer-to-peer aspect, especially again for young women, is very strong. Don't forget, again, the online component. This can be formal or informal. There are also national or global programs, Million Women Mentors. Their goal is to get literally 1 million women mentors to be made available for 1 million or more girls. And they do, again, have a sub-focus on the STEM fields. And then again, think about some of your broader programs like that mentorship could be built into. I talked again about that internship program that was started at the Dwight School, and they built in a sub-portion of mentorship within that. One thing I did, I forgot to mention one great idea in the classroom setting. There are some great nonprofits, and this is sort of a cross between community and classroom, but there are some great nonprofits focused very specifically on STEM and girls in STEM, and they actually they will come in to your classroom and have classroom situations. One of them is Digits, and this is where engineers will go into classrooms and talk about engineering. It's kind of fun. They do it through, they do it based on the first names of the students. So if you're Penelope, they would take the P and they might talk about physics for a few minutes. And then they kind of go around the room, and Beth might be biology, or Kate might be kinetics or something like that. So it's a fun way to get things going. Two important higher level concepts to think about is that, number one, STEM fields are all integrated. I think a lot of times we'll think about STEM fields in their verticals, but your math skills will translate over into excitement about computer science 2 years down the road. So thinking about, as you move people and you get young girls excited in these fields, having girls who might identify themselves as science lovers start playing around with maybe some robots is still going to be a great environment. And then taking that to the mentorship level, thinking also about not pigeonholing yourself into assigning people very specifically. Again, STEM field is, a lot of the concepts are very integrated, and in general, having females in a lot of these different, what could be considered verticals, you know, you can still pull. So for instance, if you're in a community and there's a very large biotech company in the area, don't feel that you just have to go out and create a relationship with them simply based on biotech skills. A lot of that can be transferred into any STEM field that you have and really build upon that. Okay, so I think at this point I am pretty much through everything that I wanted to present to everybody, and I'd like to open the floor to questions, which will have to be typed in. I also would invite everybody to check out Girls in Tech, and also not just Girls in Tech, but you know, you can search online very easily for girls STEM mentoring programs, and there's a load of information on the benefits of it. Again, in some cases, people have to put together a compelling package to turn around to administration to make a case. So there are a lot of stats out there, benefits, et cetera. And then there are a lot of specific programs available to you, or something that you could model programs off of. So I will end there if we have any questions.
Hi there.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in, or you can ask me. I know we're having some issues with the audio, but I'd be happy to pass along your question to Kate to answer. And also, just a quick reminder, we also are recording all of this, so the whole presentation with all of Kate's presentation will be available on our YouTube channel. So that's also something that you can keep a lookout for on our Twitter and Facebook pages, and we'll be promoting that and spreading that through there.